6:30, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. And let's do a quorum of Mr. Bailey,
Present.
Ganesh,
Here.
Dean Ward chairs here. Mr. Wooten,
Yeah.
Mr. Stark,
Here.
and Mr. Huffines is out, and it looks like Mr. Young is out. Okay, pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did everybody have opportunity to read the minutes from last month? And if so, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, the minutes be approved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right. Everyone's here, so there's no need for me to go over the board rules. And we'll just go on down here to the old business, Cameron, that's starting at number 6A.
Yes, sir. So this is a ongoing request to rezone 0.79 acre lot at 759 Jimmy Kerr Road and 0 Jimmy Kerr Road from unzoned to B2 general business. The applicant wishes to make a water connection to the existing house on the property. Doing so requires the applicant to get annexed into the city. The property cannot be annexed without an appropriate zoning classification, which is why it's in front of us. The applicant has requested the B2 zoning district to stay consistent with the zoning area and also keep the single family home in an approved zoning use classification. The property also has a portion of land in the city that is zone B2 already. The property is not located on the future land use map since it's outside of our city limits, but the land use map shows the area around it being an industrial warehouse use area. And that's all that I have.
Cameron, I'm gonna hold that open and move it on down the agenda, just in case they may come in, might be running behind or something.
Yes, sir. If we haven't,
Take any action if we do it at all on that.
for sure.
So if we could, we're just gonna move that down the agenda. Let's go to new business, starting at 7A.
Yes, sir. Okay, moving on. So this is a text amendment for a recreational open space location. As you all know, we at our, was it 2 months ago meeting, we recommended approval for a open space, recreational open space text amendment that was later approved by city council. City council has then requested city staff to analyze that previously approved recreational open space ordinance and include a section that provides a location requirement of recreational open space inside of these subdivisions. Staff has come up with the requirement that 90% of the lots must be located within 1/4 mile or 1,320 feet of a recreational open space area. This will be measured by linear feet of right of way that leads to the recreational space, so just not a diagonal line that cuts through private property. So it's measured from the roadways.
Cameron, how would you come up with this 1/4 mile? I don't think we have a subdivision
That's greater than 1/4 mile in
greater
roads.
than a 1/4 mile, that where open space would be used or could be used.
Yes, sir.
And what was staff thinking when we come up with the 1/4 mile? Why didn't we think about 1/8 of a mile or something like that?
I think it's just pretty general. I mean, within a 1/4 mile walking distance from all the, pretty much essentially all the properties through there. Just because we don't have one right now doesn't mean that we won't in the future. I think of like these larger areas that aren't specifically open space subdivisions, but the 400 lot development, Riley's Meadow, probably has over a mile or two of roadway through there. And so that, and it also makes, I guess, a requirement for having, if you're not within a 1/4 mile or 90% of them, you have to have multiple pods spread throughout, so all of them can meet that requirement. I guess if you want it to be a little closer in proximity, you could definitely locate it or lessen it down to that 1/8 of a mile or whatever that feet requirement is. But I think that was just our thought process, is to keep it within a reasonable walking distance, to also for these larger developments, be able to kind of spread them out throughout. But I guess even with the lesser requirement, you'd still be able to kind of plot them out throughout and not just have them in one giant space.
Did you have an opportunity to look at Riley's Meadow? I know it's already approved and everything, just to kind of put this scale to Riley's Meadows and tell me how many it would have been out there?
No, sir. I mean, we can take a quick look if we absolutely need to. The only open space area that they have out there is a little pool house area through here. And I think that is the closest, this is the only little open space area, recreational open space area they have, I should say. I don't know if I can, let me see if I have any measurements on here. I don't know if I did.
But under these new rules that's being posed, how many would they had to have there?
Well, this one's a little bit different as well because this is a conditional rezoning, but just for, terms of us speaking, it would really depend on whatever size requirements that they have through here and what the new ordinance would require them to have recreational wise. And then, of course, you take from probably this longest area through here, say, how long is a quarter mile? If a quarter mile stops right here, it's just measuring from, or I should say, you're measuring from here, quarter mile, and seeing how many are in that proximity. If it's not 90% of the total homes through there, then they're gonna have to put something somewhere else. So it fully encompasses that area. So looking at it, I mean, area might not make the requirement of whatever it may be for the current recreational open space. But like I said, this one's a hard one to kind of go up against because this one's something that was council approved, or
Right.
one that probably doesn't have anything.
I was just trying to get an idea with this, what that would look like if we went back and compared that to some of the stuff on Rogers Road or.
Yeah, this probably be a better one right here. I don't know if any of these, any of this area, because this is all R9, and I
Yeah.
think they used all R9, but let's say for instance, all this was R12, right? And they did an open space subdivision to get 10,000 square foot lots. There's a good chance that this is probably a quarter mile right here. So you got all this area back down through here. Does it reach a quarter mile through here? So you're having to find either a centralized location or put different parks around or different pockets around to where they can all meet that quarter mile requirement.
Do you think as a planner that more is better than less?
More is in the length from it.
No, more parks, like a big area like that, and then you only have one open space park, if it met this definition and they put it all the way down here to lower end or middle, do you think that that's something adequate that the city would like to see, or would you rather see more parks?
I think from the understanding of what the city council has requested, is they want it to be more spread out throughout the development. I think they don't want it to be something to where it's tucked back here at the very back.
Right.
And we tried to meet that requirement. I think we just kind of put something together that we thought would be, relatively okay. Maybe the quarter mile may have been a little bit too much, but I think from us taking a look at it, we thought it would be pretty understandable. I wish I could measure some of this stuff so we can get a good gauge of it, but unfortunately, not able to. I might be able to, I might turn this off, and if y'all want to keep on talking a little bit, I might be able to pull something up. See if I can get the stat.
A lot would do with the shape of the lots as well as the area. If it was oblong or if it was actually square.
I just remember the one that we're on, Rogers Road where all of the land in the lower section was in the floodplain. And they used that floodplain land as their open space. I don't know if it would met this requirement, if this would have been in play at the time, that quarter mile. I don't remember what it was, but I just wanted, I don't want to see it all tucked in one spot, because I think I've been to the last several council meetings and that was the logistics of what I was
They
getting.
just stuck it in there.
I was getting from them. They wanted to see more.
Yeah, I kind of got that impression too. They wanted more, smaller would be better.
Right.
And not tucked away in the least desirable place is what I think.
Well, then
That's the
access,
impression I got,
Yeah.
that their developers are putting these things in the least desirable place. I would agree with you. I would
access
tend
to it,
to go down to like an eighth of a mile.
got some houses that have a lot of access to it, and you got others a long way away. I could see it being more centralized and smaller in size.
I think right around a recreational area, you're gonna have more noise, more activity, more traffic, that
Definitely.
sort of thing. Spread that out too.
That would be more welcoming if it was crowded.
Like a man says, I like mayonnaise on my sandwich, but I don't like it in one glob. Spread it out.
Yeah, spread. yesterday about getting mail up my way. He said it was like a turtle swimming through peanut butter, trying to get.
All right, I think I may have something here.
All right,
I think. All right, yeah, so we got a little bit of a measurement through here. So let's see what we can do. So yeah, from,
2,200 feet there.
yeah, and that's from Rogers Road to that stub out right there.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, that's more than a quarter mile that you're taking a look at, and that's not gonna be 90% of the homes that's through there, because you're still developing on the bottom half down through there. So you're potentially looking at maybe installing one right here
Mm-hmm.
and one right here.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know,
Yeah, that's
meeting
just
the
the
requirement.
idea.
So,
Anybody got any questions for Cameron? Thank you, Cameron.
yes, sir. Sorry it took so long.
No, that's all right. Certainly it's fine. Any questions for Cameron? Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. Me personally would like to see this cut down to 1/8 of a mile.
I tend to agree with you.
Same here.
If it was something that we was gonna approve, I would like to see it at 1/8 of a mile, which would give more. And it would also make the developer be a little more creative by putting more of them in. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I'm trying to look and see what an 1/8 of a mile is. I think 1/8 of a mile is 660 feet. So if you're gonna make a recommendation, I'd say to do an 1/8 of a mile or 660 feet. Cool, me.
Or you can do 1/8 of a mile / 660 feet, either, yeah, whatever,
In your recommendation, whenever you're making it, if you are looking to change it to include both of those metrics.
okay. Any further discussion? All right, if I don't have any further discussion, I'll entertain a motion. Make the motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I make a motion that we approve the ordinance with the following changes in the section E. That's in our agenda package tonight in the open space subdivisions which require recreational open space as defined by section 10.249.4 F. 90% of lots must be located within 1/8 of a mile or 660 feet of the recreational open space area. The distance will be measured in linear feet on the right of way that leads from a lot to the recreational open space area. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Staff made recommendation for a quarter. Planning board made a recommendation for an 1/8. Which one goes to the board? Both of them?
So yeah, both of them will go. What we did, the same thing with the open space is I'll provide the original. And I'll also provide planning board's recommendation, with the reasoning behind it as well. So I'll provide a staff one and then planning board recommendation as well.
Cameron, next item on the agenda?
Yes, sir. Another city council requested item, they have requested city staff to review and include definitions for both short-term rentals and boarding homes inside of the development ordinance. Staff has defined them, included them in the table of permitted uses, and provided use-specific notes that adds an extra layer of requirement for these uses. That is essentially all. You can take a look through your packet. The definitions are inside of there, inside the use tables. If there's any particular uses that you see that would need to be included or excluded, that's something we can discuss about as well. The specific notes associated with them, is definitely something we can talk about as well. So we can definitely spend some time and look through this one.
All right. Who wants to start? Me? All right. Let me just go ahead and start with this one, Cameron. I'm gonna start with the boarding house definition.
Yes, sir.
And me and you've had a little conversation about it, and I want us to be able to have things that are enforceable in our ordinance. And the definition itself of boarding house, I mean, I don't know how we can write it better, but I don't see how we can enforce it. Because when you start talking about guests and people staying in a person's house and collecting rents and other things like that, to define it as a boarding house, I don't know how we can prove that. And I know me and you've had discussion that very in depth, and I hope we can come up with some better ideas of what we got here. There's nothing wrong. What I see wrong is how do you enforce it? And if you put a number on it, if you put a number of people living in a house, then is that a constitutional issue? How can you tell me that I can't have 5 people staying in my house or spending a night in my house for more than 30 consecutive days? You can tell me that I can't operate a boarding house, which I respect and understand, but we can have all the definitions we want, but if we can't prove it, what can we do to make it better, to make it provable? And biggest thing is, like I said, I own rental property. I lease my house. It's a 2-story house to Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey tells me, Mr. Ward, I'm gonna have 6 people living in my house. I get a lease, and in the lease I give to Mr. Bailey, it says he's gonna have 6 people living there, and Mr. Bailey signs it. And Mr. Bailey's gonna pay me X number of dollars. Well, 6 months, a year from now, I get a call from the planning department that tells me that Mr. Bailey is running a boarding house there. And me as the property owner, you're telling me that I'm in violation of an ordinance, and I ask you, well, how am I in violation? And you'll say, well, he's got 6 people living there and he's collecting rent. And I said, well, how do you know he's collecting rent? And you can't tell me that he's collecting rent. You're assuming something, then is he in violation of the ordinance? It's not like it's something that as simple as having an ordinance in there that says that your grass can't be over 18 inches and that the zoning officer can't ride by with the zoning officer's own eyes and get out with a tape measure and say, yep, that's taller than 18 inches, it's in violation, and certainly we can enforce that. Or junk cars parked in the yard that someone can see, but paying rent to someone on the inside of the house, unless someone from within the house tells you that, how are we going to enforce what's called a boarding house? That's the only thing I want to know, is how we're going to enforce it. If we can't enforce it, then let's try to figure out the language that we can put in there to give our people all the power that they need to be able to combat that issue. What about you guys? Have some of your thoughts on this?
Problem I have with the boarding house is a similar situation where it marks down mays and shalls, and it doesn't have anything there that can actually be legally enforced by the city. And then it says occupancies of unrelated individuals. So you're going to put people that don't know each other in different rooms of the house. But again, it doesn't say how many. And collecting rent, again, that's a problem where you don't know if the man's collecting rent or how much, and from each individual, and does it fall into an enforceable section that the city can say it's an actual boarding house, and then fall back on the landowner, as the chairman said, and he's in violation. It's very vague as to what a boarding house is in this definition here.
Question for Cameron. Cameron, where did you get the verbiage for this?
Through multiple different municipalities, have essentially the same type of verbiage throughout. We took and looked and pretty much compared and contrasted and came up with this, like Asheville. What did I say? Butner, Greensboro, I believe, was another one. Wilmington has some of these associations as well. I think that was more on the short-term rental side of it. But I mean, it's been gathered from on the NC Plan listserv. I think we sent out and asked for some information from these people, got it, looked over it, provided this definition, and it's kind of consistent with what a lot of the other people have as well.
As part of that responses, did you get any kind of indication as to how they did enforcement?
No, sir. I think the
Did they have
enforcement
any
side of it.
Possibility of litigation or anything like that in the responses?
No, sir. Will you turn your mic on, please, sir? You're good.
My apologies. What is the permitting process?
So for the boarding houses, if somebody were to come into my office and say that I was looking to, excuse me, based on what this current stuff reads, if somebody were to come in my office and be like, I would like to open up a boarding house, I have a home, I want to rent it out to 5 different people that are not in relation, have 5 different bedrooms, they have access to the kitchen, laundry room, bathroom, then they would have to file a special use permit that would come in front of you all, and then would go in front of city council for their approval. Ultimately, it would be up to city council, whether or not the boarding house meets the 6 criteria for the special use permit, and thus making their decision on it. Of course, if somebody were to come in here and ask for a boarding house in the R18 zoning district, they wouldn't be approved for it at all based on what's reading through here, because it doesn't classify as any type of use for it or permitted use. I think it's just the, what is it, the R12, or no, excuse me, the R9, the R7, and the RG are the only ones that permit these types of things. So if you had a lot in a house that was zoned R9, you could come in and you could say, I have a house, I have 4 bedrooms, I have 4 people of different relations that's gonna live here. I need to get a permit for a boarding house. You would have to go in front of planning board and city council to get approval through the special use permit process.
I know presently, right now, that the city of Burlington's in litigation over boarding houses.
Okay.
I brought this up 8 months, 9 months ago, that we needed to get ahead of the curve. And I know that the attorney in Greensboro who's handling the boarding house, not for the city, but for the owner of the house, figured a workaround after 6 or 8 months of fighting with the city about definition of a boarding house and how you're going to enforce it. And I know a whole lot more about it than probably I should, but I know a whole lot more about it that I'll be glad to share
Yes, sir.
how they done the enforcement part.
Okay.
But she come up to, a workaround was vacation rental.
Mhm.
Even though we've got a vacation rental in here, language changed tonight too, that you're putting in here. She come around that and told the person that owns the boarding house, I said, well, listen, we're not gonna call your houses boarding houses anymore. We're gonna call them short-term rentals. You're gonna get a new contract every 30 days.
Okay.
So that's the workaround of the boarding house. Even though we can have an ordinance against it, as long as they get a fresh new contract every 30 days, they're still running a boarding house. The enforcement started from a fire at the house. The fire department was dispatched to the house. When the fire department got there, the fire department saw what appeared to be a boarding house, doors that had lockable knobs on it.
Mhm.
They called the building inspection department while they was out there. The inspections comes out there and they want to do a minimum housing inspection.
Okay.
They used the pretext of the fire department being there to give them the authority to come in and do a minimum housing inspection. That's how the boarding house and how this got started over there. And then ultimately, this litigation that's been going on for close to 2 years now. The gentleman's still running the houses the same way, but he's doing them as vacation rentals. The city didn't have a ordinance at that time on vacation rentals. There's nothing they can do to him. And it was a workaround. And that's why I brought it up 8 months ago that we needed to get ahead of the curve, because I know that's coming to Graham sooner than later. But I want to get ahead of the curve in a way that we can enforce something. And if the only way that we can enforce it is by calling the inspection department after the fire department gets there, that's kind of useless for us. The people who want to operate legally are going to come get the permit that you're proposing.
Yes, sir.
The people, but they may not tell you that I'm going to have 6 people living there that's not related.
Right.
They may come get the permit, but they're not going to tell you they're not going to have 6 people that's not related there. Voluntarily, most of them are not. They're gonna come down here to try to comply with the permit. They're gonna come and say, hey, I wanna operate in a boarding house, and you're gonna say, well, this is your requirements, A, B, C, and D. And then you ask them, well, who's gonna live there? Well, I don't know. I hadn't rented it yet. But I know that it's got 5 bedrooms, and I know that somebody's probably got some kids, and 2 kids are gonna sleep, so 6 people are gonna be there.
Yeah.
Then how are we gonna enforce that? I just wanna make sure that we got teeth. We don't need to keep writing things that are, in my opinion, unenforceable.
Okay.
I understand you say Greensboro's doing this, and I understand you saying that, but I'd like to know what the league thinks about this, what the league would say. And that's why I told you I wanted to be on a phone conversation with you tomorrow, and let's call down there and get a legal opinion from the league, someone who does this, because I know that I can go get my computer out, and I know that I can jump on Westlaw, and I know that I probably can pull 30 cases across the United States about boarding houses that's going to say that what we're talking about right here is unenforceable.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I'm not a lawyer, but I've had a lot of experience in doing research and I want it to be the best for us that we don't go in litigation over it.
Okay.
If I'm a law-abiding citizen that owns rental property in Graham and I'm trying to do things the right way and I come down here and get my permit, I'm gonna meet this criteria. You might ask me the question, well, is everybody that lives there gonna be related? And I'm gonna tell you, well, it's gonna be a rental house. It's gonna be a boarding house, rental house. I don't know if they're related or not. Well, you're gonna say, well, this is the criteria. Once that you give me my certificate where I can operate that as that, I'm gonna go rent this house and I don't know what the people do inside of that house.
Mhm.
I'm responsible for the house,
Yes, sir.
but I don't know if they subleased it. I don't know if they went in there and started renting rooms out and putting the doorknobs on there, because I don't go do inspections until I get a call from the police department, say, hey, we've had 31 calls over here at your house for service. Can you check on it? Then I'll go do what I need to do as a property owner.
Mhm. So,
Let's think about out of the box and let's see what kind of language we can come up with to either tonight or hold it over to next month on this one particular thing and see what we can come up with and see how we can write this that will be something that's enforceable. Me and you had a long discussion and some of the things that in our ordinance book, we can see, we can ride by, the zoning officer can ride by and see it from their car, walk down the street and see it. We know they're in violation, is clear cut. But if you got a guess that they're in violation, then the paper is written on, it's not worth anything.
so, I guess one point that I have is you mentioned that I would be the one to give them the permit for the boarding house. Again, that would come in front of you all and city council through a quasi judicial process, but they would have to provide, of course, legal testimony that all of this is going to be met the criteria. So if they're not meeting the criteria after the fact, then that could cause legal action against them. So
Yeah.
that's the one part it's the only thing I have to say.
No, I agree with what you're saying, that it is gonna come before us. But I don't know, once it leaves from here and it gets an approval from here, it gets an
Mhm.
approval from council, once he starts operating, I don't know if he's charging rent on the inside of that house. So how are we gonna prove
Enforce
that
it.
he's in violation? We got to be able to prove he's in violation. This is not something that's clear cut that we can prove unless you don't have subpoena power. City don't have subpoena power. So how are we gonna get those records? That he's taking cash from all these people that he's renting. How are we gonna be able to prove it unless someone that lives there says, hey, I'm paying Dean there to rent here. I'm renting this one room from Dean and I get use of the bathroom and the kitchen, the common areas. And then next thing you know, you got two. Well, you can prove something then. You got some witnesses there. But if you don't have those witnesses, how are we as a city gonna be able to say they're in violation? It's not as clear cut as we want it to be. How are we gonna say that?
For sure. And like I said, I gave you the example of nothing being clear cut through the difference between, the group homes and family care homes. It's a matter of, like what you said, the fire department going out there and seeing that there's different locks, building inspectors, seeing these types of things, and thus it's being inside of violation. To your point about them being able to classify it as short-term rentals, vacation homes, with the short-term rental definition that we do have, of course, the caveat inside of there that does state like, this does not include hotels, motels, boarding homes, or bed and breakfasts. So the short-term rental is its own specific category. So you wouldn't be able to classify it as this when it's actually a boarding house. And it's also for a shorter term, like you said, I think it says 30 days here that you would be able to consecutively rent it out. So yeah, you could continue reoccurring doing it, but it would still be classified as the boarding house when you have this and people are continuously renting out. Because the overall grand use of it is still the boarding house.
I agree with your definition and your classification there, but how do you enforce that? How do you know that each individual room's paying rent? If I'm the same landlord or the same tenant that rents it every 30 days, I just renew my lease every 30 days and I pay you rent again for another 30 days and then I'm subleasing it on the inside. How do we get past that part? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we are giving it a definition of what it's called,
Mhm.
but how do you prove that they're in violation of the ordinance? We write something that we can't prove.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, let me volunteer this. I just pulled it up. It says, and we could include this somehow or another legally
Yeah, go ahead.
through a lawyer to help us with the language, but it says lodgers legally only obtain a license to use their rooms and not exclusive possession, so the landlord retains the right of access. So each boarder has to have a license in order to rent that room, which is proof that he's paying rent for that particular room.
essentially a lease, like each person is collecting a lease from
Yes.
but then I guess back to Chair Ward's point is he's saying that if he's the one that's renting it out to one person and that one person under him is subletting it out for just petty cash, then how are we gonna have any track of that?
That has to be within that contract that is written up that he can't sublease it. Is that what you?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but how
How do you
how do you
enforce
make
it?
it enforceable? Because if you own the house, you rent it to me, and I tell you up front, 6 people gonna be living there, and you say, okay, Dean, no problem, here's your lease, and I sign it, and I pay you your money. I go in there and then I rent to everybody else in here,
6
and
individuals.
I collect the money, and I don't tell you that I'm subleasing it in there. I told you it's gonna be 6 people living there. How do you enforce it as a boarding house?
The only way that we could potentially do it is if, as
Exactly.
Chair Ward said, is like if they come in through the legal route, they get their approval through the special use, you add a condition to their approval that they are not to allow any type of subleasing through there and out.
There you
But
go.
like I
Yeah.
said, that's the legal route of it. That is something that could also be imposed or could be written inside of there, no owner subleasing from inside.
That's,
Um,
that was the avenue I was going down.
Yes, sir.
And that's
Exactly.
all well and good, but how do you verify and enforce?
Yeah,
what
again,
you've
that's
written.
what,
You look at the original lease that they wrote up.
No, no,
That's still a
that's
verifying
still,
thing.
that's not verification.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
I don't have anything in mind. I'm agreeing with Dean at
Okay.
this point, Chair Ward, that I think this is going to be one of those things that's going to be subject to abuse if we're not careful. If we don't have some way of verifying,
Enforce it.
we're going to wind up with a boarding house with one person rents a room and 2 or 3 people start coming in there and you got 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
However it might be in one room, then you got a lot of other problems.
So
These
currently
things
we
could lead to
allow,
other things. What we're talking about here is not the definition, it's the verification
right.
and the enforcement.
Enforcement.
I'll probably, so like I said, I mean, until we figure something out, I mean, this stuff is gonna continue to happen as well. Whether we have a definition for it or not. We can
Mhm.
definitely step back and take a look at it, or we can hash some stuff out now, see if we can try and figure it out. But like I said, it's completely up to you all how we move forward.
Well, the question I have is, do we have any similar language for apartments? You know, they
Same
sign
thing.
a lease, they
Same
say,
thing. Apartments would fall in that same category,
Right.
even though it's not a house.
Yeah,
But
You can.
if you got an apartment that's a
Mhm.
4-bedroom or a
Four-bedroom,
3-bedroom
lease
apartment and there's 6
rooms
people
out.
living in there, or are they running a boarding house? If they're renting the rooms out, how we,
Essentially,
gonna- it's a little different because it's not a single family dwelling that we're talking about and on an individual lot. Apartments have got a little bit more control. They do go in them more. Most of them got on-site managers or there daily.
right.
so.
You have a person that signs a lease with an apartment, 3-bedroom apartment. Okay, how many people are you gonna have living here? Oh, it's 2 people. Well, you could very easily wind up with 8, 10 people in a 3-bedroom apartment, whether they're family members, friends, whatever it might be. How do you enforce that?
Yeah,
How do you enforce that lease? You say resident manager,
Right,
but that's not enforcement. That's not verification enforcement from a legal standpoint from the city. That's private.
so I still, and I guess to your point about the apartments, the use definition is classified as a residential establishment. So it could be subject to this apartment context as well, because the apartment would still be this residential establishment. And I guess still back to the point, if you include something along the lines what Mr. Benesh was saying about the language about subletting, coming back to the talk and not to get anything visual wise with the aspect of if somebody had high grass, right? It's still the property owner's responsibility to maintain that, even if there's a tenant still out there. So they still get the violation letter, which says that you're in violation, you have sublet, thus is causing this boarding house here. So they are still the ones liable for the violation, essentially. But
I understand what you're saying, but you're gonna have to be able to tell me how they're in violation. What's your evidence? And if you can't give me evidence, you can just say, well, they got 7 people living there, or they got 6 people living there. and you can't prove that they're paying rent, then how can you say that it's a boarding house? I'm gonna say, come on, let's go to court. And I'm gonna go get me a lawyer and I'm gonna sue the city.
Yeah, so I mean, what happens if you take the compensation piece out of the definition? And it's just, accommodate single room occupancies of unrelated individuals?
How can you do that constitutionally?
What, say that they're living there and they're,
I got 6 cousins that live here, or 5 cousins that live here, and they're 5th and 6th cousins down that I don't ever see in my lifetime,
Right.
but they're family members.
Are they related?
So, is a cousin related?
that's what I'm saying, is if that's the case, then it's completely fine to operate as a boarding house, but you still have to go through the processes to get your permit approval.
I got 5 of my best friends,
Y'all are not related.
but it's unconstitutional. You telling me who can live in my house?
According to what this ordinance says, yes.
I feel like it's unconstitutional. That's
So
what I'm
is it
saying. It's
unconstitutional for me to say that you can't build a fence in your house or around your house that's 10 feet tall?
No,
Or you can't operate
No.
a, at-home business that encompasses your full house?
I-
Because that's another thing that you could take a look at is, I mean, if you look at our, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but for somebody that's running a home occupation, somebody's running a home occupation inside of their house that is not meeting the criteria of this ordinance, we have the authority to send a violation letter out there if they are not meeting those requirements. If you are taking more than 250 square feet of your house and occupying it as an occupation that is not something that is listed inside of the approvable uses of a home occupation, then we still have the zoning authority to send you a violation
Do
and
you-
then assess fines.
do you have the ability to prove it?
Yes.
I mean, what would be, if you use that circumstances? Tell me what your, how you come to that form that they was using more, and then I'm gonna say, well, you visually saw it. Or whatever, how did you get to that evidence to see that you could prove that because it's inside of their house?
Because there's certain criteria. Like I said, I mean, we would never be able to tell until something were to come arise. I mean, unless somebody called in and complained, and we'd have to send the building inspector out there to take a look inside the home.
And I don't have to let you in.
Unless we get some type of order from the police that.
You have to get an administrative search warrant to get in.
Yeah.
In order to do that, you gotta have probable cause.
And the probable cause is that somebody is complaining that you're operating something that is not supposed to be operated inside there, thus leading to a violation of our development ordinance, which is the
That's
cause
not,
itself.
that's not probable cause. That'd be the same as me calling the police and saying, hey, Cameron's got marijuana in his pocket. But they say, well, how do you know? Well, I didn't see it.
You could say I had it inside of my house and you smelled it.
That's
It could
still
cut-
not
could come
enough.
back.
That's not enough.
You don't think so?
I know it's not. I'm telling you, it's not.
Mhm.
So I'm not arguing with you. I want us to, whatever we put together, is
Okay.
something that is very, something that we can enforce.
Yes, sir. I'm with you.
I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm just saying,
I'm not either. I'm to the point where, I mean, like I said, we provided what we thought was substantial enough to get this thing moving through. If you
Well,
all.
let me share
uh,
you
we can
with
move
this,
forward.
and I'll read this to you as well. I mean, because I'm really not in favor of boarding houses because of
I'm not either.
the way the definition is so vague. But it says, lower class people took their places way back when it first started, that wasn't the case. And communal living spaces became associated with urban decay. Cities then began implementing zoning laws that limited the number of unrelated people who could live in the same house, making most boarding houses illegal
So-
because of the fact that you don't have any way of enforcing it, which what Dean was saying makes it unconstitutional when you start putting numbers on what you can do in that house.
But you just said that it would do away with most due to the zoning restrictions that were applied on there,
You're right.
due to the amount of unrelated people that were living inside the home. So it must have had some sort of impact inside of it that the zoning laws had.
Like I said, there's so many definitions of
definitely
boarding
keep it
houses,
popping
but
up.
it comes into a play of,
For sure.
like, he said, enforcing, and you can't.
Okay,
That's,
Two things.
that's fine.
Two things I want to add. You're talking about self-policing, basically.
Me.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're talking about how you actually verify and enforce, not self-policing.
Okay.
Okay. The second thing is, I think when you really need to be careful to make a differentiation between what you have in this definition and what would be more appropriately put into a lease agreement. Okay,
yes, sir.
okay.
I think we need a
You know,
lot
understand
of
what I'm
legal
saying there?
advice. in there.
Okay.
Yeah, we got someone looking at this. So like I said, it's on, balls in y'all's court at the moment. So
I have one comment. I'm not even sure this is legal at this point, but we
Well-
need to get inside. So could we require in the special use permit that they open the facility every 90 days for inspection?
Possible. I mean, I think that's like I said, these are all,
That could be a condition of the special use permit.
but then again, it goes back to what we're all arguing about is what are you gonna do if one is operating without a special use permit? How do you do it and get inside and see that all of that stuff is happening, which I completely understand. But, like I said, it's, if they've been operating thus far,
I'm not too sure that limiting the number of people is not a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And that's something I'd have to go back and do some research on, but I'm not too sure that it don't violate a clause in there. Because you have a bundle of rights when you buy a piece of property.
okay,
And there's 5 things in the bundle of rights. And the right of enjoyment is one of them. And if I enjoy my house with 5 people or 6 people staying there or 7 people staying there, as long as I'm not creating a violation on the street by impeding the flow of traffic, as long as the police is not coming to my house and for service calls, as long as there's not people calling about loud noise and stuff, I have a right under the bundle of rights to enjoy my house. And if I enjoy it with 6 people or 4 people, I don't know that we can put a number on how many people that you can say that I can have that can stay at my house. You're never gonna know unless I tell you that I'm paying rent. You're never gonna know that I'm subleasing. You're gonna come knock on the door, I'm gonna come to the door and you're gonna say, well, you the property owner? No, I rent that from Mr. Bailey. But, I got a lease with Mr. Bailey and I pay him $800 a month for this house. Well, who are all these people here? Oh, they're people that live here in the house.
it's a boarding house,
That's what you say it is. I say that's unconstitutional.
okay?
I say that you can't say it's a boarding house.
According to
you
our
can't-
zoning standards, it would be a boarding house.
That's why I want to get on a phone conversation with the league tomorrow and have some more, or whenever you got time, have some conversation about this and see if we can make it a way. I don't think you can quantify it with a number. I
Okay.
think it's got to be other things that we got to quantify it with to make it a boarding house. I
Alright.
don't think we can quantify it with a number and say you can only have 4 people that stay here or 3 people that stay here.
Well, we don't have a number that specifically says that. That's just a matter of unrelated people that are living there. I don't think it's quantified inside the definition, right?
But you're saying unrelated and living.
Yeah, so that could be,
How can you
2
tell
people
me,
plus.
how can you tell me that I can't have people stay at my house?
That's why I brought
So
up the
it's like
fact
a boarding
that,
house.
it said in that particular piece that I read that the United States basically made boarding houses illegal.
you read that?
Yes, sir. I just read it to you.
Oh, I thought you said that they kept them in there due to the fact that they were.
They made
living in
them
boarding
illegal.
houses. Okay, yeah. Like I said, ball's in y'all's court at the moment.
Any other discussion?
Just one thing I want to add as far as the enforcement goes, and I'm going to tell you a little anecdote
I'll bring it
that
back
I
up.
think is applicable here. Years ago in another lifetime, I worked at DFW Airport, Dobbs House Airline Catering. There were 3 kitchens like us in a row at DFW. Food inspector hit one of them. Somebody was on the phone to the other 2 calling. They made everything, while the food inspector was at one, the other 2 were getting things cleaned up, ready. If we have, like Mr. Sockert says, now I'm not fussing at you. If we have an inspection every 90 days, at the end of, 90 days, they're gonna have everything cleaned up, ready for the inspection. How do we get around that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'd like to see us carry this over for some further discussion
Yeah.
and maybe some of our,
Legal.
We'll figure it out.
maybe maybe each one of us take a community to call and talk to them and ask them about their enforcement, how they enforce it and have they been sued and stuff like this. I know that if you call Burlington, they're gonna tell you we're under litigation right now, board now.
Sure.
And, I just want us to have something, we've got a bunch of things on paper here and a lot of it is great and a lot of it is very enforceable. And we got other stuff on here it's great, but it's not enforceable.
Okay, we'll find a way.
So if you got time,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to maybe me, you and the league talk and let them hear from my point of view, what I'm saying and see if they think that is a violation. Cause I just don't know how you can tell me that I can't have people staying in my house that's not related to me,
Yes, sir.
and that not be a violation of my civil rights or the Urban Housing Act, is several different things it could be.
Okay.
And how it couldn't be.
More than happy to. Yes, sir.
Cameron,
So
excuse me, have you checked with the Institute of Government on this?
that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about right now.
The league.
The league, it's the League of Municipalities.
Two.
So
They got
essentially,
two resources there, two different resources.
we'll check them out. Yes, sir.
I know who I would call. I'd be talking to Robert Barb at the Institute of Government, or I'd be calling a local attorney in Greensboro and asking one of them that
Yes, sir.
has had these problems and has presented it on both sides.
Okay,
One used to be a planner
okay,
for a town and now is attorney.
okay.
I want to hold that one open, but I'm not against, talking about the short-term rentals and maybe approving it if you,
I think you'll have to table the whole thing, unfortunately, because it's part of one single text amendment. I don't think we could split it up and move it forward.
it's a definition of a,
We can definitely still talk about the short-term rental. More than happy to.
Before we move off the boarding houses, just want to say, make one comment that I think what Chair is saying is right. This is not an easy subject to deal with.
For sure. That's why we're here now.
So, I appreciate y'all's efforts, even though we're
Very
having a lot of
critical.
fun.
That's how it happens. That's why we're here. That's why we bring it in front of you all.
good conversation leads to good things.
That's why, no ill will at all. I'm here back and forth conversation, no ill will at all.
Do y'all want to talk
But
about?
I
the
think this needs to be communicated to the city council as well, that it's not an easy issue.
Mhm.
Take a little time and
I think they'll be completely understanding.
get it right the first time, as close to right as we can anyway.
Do y'all want to talk about, the definition of number 25 of short-term rentals? Not vote on anything tonight, but talk about it and see if we have anything that we might could clear up with it tonight. On page 15, there's short-term rentals, and also page 63.
Yeah, so I think the definition, and there's the 25 is the notes, right? So that's the notes to the table of permitted uses. That's the additional standards that's classified with getting a short-term rental.
Fine, if you want to go ahead and discuss it.
Okay, anybody want to start with that short-term rental definition?
The one thing that popped into my feeble brain, I think this kind of thing is necessary, even more so for people, especially they're moving from one area of the country to this area. They need a place to stay. They don't need a 6 months lease or whatever. They just need some temporary housing until they get settled.
Yes, sir.
So in light of that, I'm not sure that the 30 days would be should be a restriction in that.
As in, like, it's a good thing in there or a bad thing?
30 days probably would, I would increase that maybe to 60 days. Something like that.
If you done that, that would take, the,
Does that take it into the
that-
boarding house?
no.
No, boarding house is
No.
90,
What-
You wouldn't
more
be
than
able to
90.
Operate a vacation rental period unless it's 60 days. And if somebody like the mayor herself has several vacation rentals right here in Graham, that she wouldn't be able, if they had to stay 60 days, she wouldn't be able to operate them. So we're gonna put some of these people's houses that are, even though
Less than 60 days.
she's already operating now, so she would probably be exempt because they're already doing it before we put this in here. But
This is less.
I don't know, I mean, I think 30 days
days
is a
per
good
foot.
number for the turnover. It don't mean that they can't renew it 30 days and stay 30 more days.
correct.
Yeah,
I think that it just stops all these 3 or 4 nighters. You can't come in here and rent a house for 3 or 4
Right.
nights on a
Yeah.
vacation rental.
Right.
That would still allow them to do that inside of this ordinance.
Up to 30 days, but after 30 days, they've got to have another lease.
Yes, sir. So
Right.
you would essentially have to pay everything over again.
yeah, that's cool. Then.
But that's still, it's only one zoning permit that they have to get, because that's how the city of Wilmington got into a lot of trouble. Is they were requiring these people to re-up with a new business license every 30, 15 days and checking up on everything, and they got into heavy litigation through there, so. I think one zoning permit for this house would be the route to go, but
And would that last through the duration as long as it didn't change ownership?
Yeah, once it changed ownership, that's for every type of use. If you own a gas station and you sell it to Mr. Bailey would have to come and get a new business permit
Mhm.
and have to get a new business inspection and all.
Is this not gonna be under a special use permit?
No, sir.
Okay.
I believe this one's a little bit more common and understandable than the boarding house aspect of it, and that's why we chose so. And take a look at the zoning districts as well, where they're gonna be permitted, make sure those are all right with y'all as well. I can pull up the zoning to give you an understanding of where some of these locations are at if you need me to. Just color wise, it's probably the easiest way to do it.
Why wouldn't we want one in a residential multifamily?
Well, I mean, that comes back to your same point about boarding houses inside of apartments. I mean, you can certainly include it, but I just didn't think to include it at the time. I mean, you'd get into the aspect of people not really owning apartments, I guess. And you're just constantly turning over change inside of there.
What about a condominium?
Yeah, exactly.
So the condominium has their own zoning classification and their own zoning definition as well, so it's a little bit different. And I believe that's more sometimes the condominiums can be a little bit long-term and short-term, so it's kind of a weird little toss-up. But for,
I don't have a problem with this short-term rental, definition here. I mean, I think that's pretty fair. 30 days or less, you can do it, but at least they'll be on the radar here with the city with the application. Applying to be able to classify and advertise as a vacation rental.
yeah. So I wish we could move it forward with just that, but I think since it's a part of a whole text amendment, that's all, I guess I should have split them up, but that'll allow us, just in case if we have to make any changes to the boarding houses, we can make some changes to the short-term rentals if we have to as well. That was kind of the thought process behind having them both on one.
Any other further discussion about, these?
Short term, nope.
Then I move that we table this, text amendment to next month's meeting, and I asked it, Cameron, if me and you at some point that fits in your schedule and my schedule, that we can get on the phone with somebody from the league or Institute of Government and get some opinions and something that would support some type of enforcement action on the boarding houses
Yes, sir.
would be, a greatly appreciated, but, I move that we carry this over to next month. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Do you get that?
All right, Chairman, let me get back to the front of my. What else we got? We got short term on there. There's anybody here got any public non-agenda comments for staff?
We got to go back to the rezoning.
Right. I wasn't gonna close the meeting. I was just gonna
Okay,
see
yes, sir, my
if
apologies.
anybody had any.
No, sir.
All right, we're gonna go back to number 6A. It's already been read and,
If I could potentially add something before y'all make a decision, if you want to keep on going, I just want to at least get that in there.
no, go ahead. We're back to 6A rezoning.
Yes, sir. I understand, she didn't show up again. I did reach back out to her and let her know that tonight was the night again and that she needed to show up for y'all to make a decision. Just as a point of reference for these types of, and this is not saying that they'd be any type of rush for, what for zoning map changes, for rezonings, we do have a limit of 60 days that it can stay here in the planning board. So after this meeting, if a decision isn't made and city council wants to make a decision, they have the ability to make the decision at their next meeting.
Okay,
Just a point, but that doesn't mean that they absolutely have to, but just a point of reference. If it's tabled again, they could potentially make a decision at their next meeting.
is any further comment about this?
No, sir.
There's no further comment. I'd like to make a motion that it's denied. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Give that to Mr. Stockard.
All in favor? Any opposed? Without being able to ask questions, it's hard to just openly change a classification and approve something like that. Anything else that you have to say, Cameron or staff?
No, sir, I believe that was it. Get up with me. I'm available before 1 o'clock tomorrow. After 1 o'clock tomorrow, I have a meeting, and then I'm probably headed out to Wilmington. We're getting married on Friday, so you're gonna miss me out until the 30th of October, or 30th of September, excuse me. But Evan and
Mondays,
Aaron,
Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'm in a meeting from 9 to 1.
Mhm.
A Zoom, so I can do it after 1, or I can do it, I can do it 1:30 tomorrow.
I should be around. I think I have a meeting at 1 o'clock. It should end around 2-ish, so just stop by.
You
and I'll
wanna,
be here.
you wanna call ahead of time and see if you can make sure we're gonna have somebody that we can talk to?
Yep, I will.
I'd
I'll
line
call
up.
that morning and see if we can schedule something out, and if not, I'll let you know, all right?
Uh,
Let me, I'll jot down your number once we close all this stuff out,
Okay.
just in case.
I'd like to forward you some stuff, but I can't
You
use
got on
the
that
city.
call too.
It's gonna be here at City Hall.
Can, send it to my email?
Yeah.
You can send anything to my email.
Well knowledge.
You can't send it to my email with all the other board members. in.
Copied in.
Yes, sir, because that looks like you're trying to make decisions, and I understand, it's like Mr. Stocker was, well, we'll close the meeting and then.
Anything else to be discussed? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?